Welcome and thank you for joining. I'm Lance Hart, your host for today's LinkedIn Live event, where we'll be discussing how tailored VMware SD-WAN technology enables retail growth. Today's experts are John Lloyd and Michael Leonard.
Hello, everyone.
From VMware. Thanks, guys, for joining.
Thank you.
Guys, let's jump right in. We have a number of things to cover here, and the first thing, Michael, what is SD-WAN?
Yeah, thanks. SD-WAN is an SDN-based software that provides a virtual overlay network. And what it does is it brings intelligence and flexibility and agility to the WAN. And the purpose of it is to route traffic between remote locations and the data center or the cloud. It's a cloud delivered solution, so there's no setup required. It's centrally managed using a centralized orchestrator, and the orchestrator manages edge devices out in the remote locations. And SD-WAN provides traffic steering based on application policies. So that's the intelligent part. It knows what the applications are and where they're destined for, whether the cloud or the data center. The policy-based routing in the SD-WAN can replace the existing router, and it brings in the ability to use dual links, either private networks or broadband. And it directs traffic to the gateways that we see in the middle of the picture, and then they intelligently steer the traffic to the end location. And SD-WAN provides a number of capabilities to enhance the performance of the applications. And also it provides abilities to bring in virtual services like security and network intelligence. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's the basic. It's a virtual overlay network that sits on top of the routers and provides the intelligence to the network.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question we have is, what benefits will retail companies experience after implementing SD-WAN?
Yeah, so Michael hit on it, and I think it's key to dive in. So as you share this slide, you're going to see some kind of key technical words that may jump out. If you're in retail, PCI is going to jump off the screen at you. Obviously, that's a huge industry regulation that we need to meet. But when Michael talks about this concept of a virtual overlay or a virtual network, what that brings to retail is freedom. It brings flexibility. Never really before SD-WAN could you go and bring the technology that makes sense. Maybe it's the connectivity that makes sense. Maybe it's the provider that makes sense. When Michael talked about really overlaying on existing routers, up until now, you had to go to either a single carrier and ask for this expensive private dedicated network, or you had to manually try to build this all out yourself by getting VPNs, static IPs. So the first thing, it's going to bring ease of operation. The second is it brings flexibility, choice. Go and build the technology, what's available. Michael hit on LTE, he hit on broadband, private networks, dedicated networks. And I think the other thing is really around operational pathway. If you think about a retail store, we always try to frame it up this way. You have to solve the same business problems as any other industry, but you got to go do it 500 times or 1,000 times. And so that creates, how do I move on? How do I create this pathway forward? How do I start to phase out contracts, end dates, things like that? And I think what we're able to do with SD-WAN, create that virtual overlay, is really start to create two disparate networks, one that's on SD-WAN and one that's not. And as contracts come up, we move them over to the SD-WAN. So it's really giving them that not have to kind of rip and replace or cut 500 sites in one night. And then the flexibility of routing applications based on their business. Michael mentioned that, hey, it's going to recognize, it's smart enough to recognize the router or the application, not just route it. It's smart enough to do service insertion and send things to security or send things to gateways if it needs to, but not everything. And in the retail space, you may have 3 or 4 key applications that are running a retail store, which is completely different than what's running your corporate office or your distribution centers. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about flexibility, is being able to design for a business outcome, being able to put in one technology that creates that virtual overlay and allows that flexibility.
All right, thank you. Can it help with frequent brownouts and blackouts at remote rural locations?
So I love this question because the answer, what we're talking about today with VMware and the VMware SD-WAN and SASE platform is yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things from an Onyx standpoint, why we really value this partnership. SD-WAN is a very broad term. It's obviously a huge industry. It's been a buzzword. It's starting to get replaced by SASE as a new buzzword that is kind of used generically. If you're a packet-based as opposed to flow-based, yes. With the dynamic multipath optimization, or DMPO, that VMware talks about in their underlying routing engine, even over a single link, we can duplicate that packet. We can send and protect against brownouts over a single link. When I talk about flexibility in retail, and I know we're going to talk more about what kind of drives operationally later on, but how do we make the unreliable reliable? In retail, I'm going to have sites that maybe go offline, and when that happens, I've got a revenue impact. I got a really big challenge. And so in the past, we solved that with SLA-driven networks. Didn't keep us up, didn't keep the revenue flowing, but it kind of kept us, covering our own behind from a job standpoint. And so when we start talking about brownouts or blackouts, whether it's two different links, then we can steer that traffic from A to B based on application. But really what I think is unique about VMware and a lot of other SD-WAN players don't live up to what VMware brings to this space is the ability over a single link to make unreliable reliable, and it comes down to their DMPO protocol.
Here's a good question. How do you justify the ROI on SD-WAN?
So, great question. It depends on where you're coming from. Typically in the retail space, we see kind of two schools. And one I mentioned was, I've got MPLS. I know it's not going to always stay up. I know it's low bandwidth. I know it's expensive, but I have an SLA. And so when a store goes down, I'm covered to go to the business and say, we're doing everything we can. The second school of thought is, well, we didn't want to spend that kind of money anyway. We wanted more bandwidth. And so we just did this manual VPN, disparate broadband networks. Maybe I have more downtime. Maybe I have a secondary link. And so the answer of what drives ROI, it depends on where you're looking at. We see organizations save 30 to 40% when they move from traditional legacy MPLS over to VMware SD-WAN, bringing broadband and LTE as underlay. We also see network dependency and reliability go up because we have two disparate networks. We have multiple routes. We have GPON or fiber-based networks as opposed to some legacy copper, depending on where you're at. We have LTE where we're not route dependent. So that's the first thing. We see cost savings right away, moving away from private legacy dead technology. I don't want to say dead for MPLS, but it's certainly moving the way of frame relay more and more. Then you look at what's the operational efficiency that's gained by it. And a lot of retailers have applications like point of sale or time clock in, clock out, price scanner, things that are mission critical to running their business. And they can't bring that over a T1 MPLS, or they can't bring that over a 5x768 DSL. And so they kind of build out these stores as mini data centers where they're building, VMware vSphere, applications in the back office, and then they're building that in high availability. Well, again, when you think about solving a business problem and you start to have to solve that 500 times, 800 times, 1,000 times, however many sites you have, right? I think we have retailers on our VMware platform that are over 3,000 locations globally. That's a really big challenge to go and solve. And so I think for us, when we talk with customers, we say, hey, look, I'm already on internet. Great. We're going to bring you ROI by making that more reliable. We talked about routing over a single link. We talked about protecting against brownouts, but it's also centralizing. Michael talked about on the very first intro here, service insertion with security. So what's your posture today? Are you backhauling all of your applications, all of your internet bound traffic to a single data center in your network to do packet inspection PCI? Well, that's adding a lot of latency. And also you're having to size your internet pipes for that, or your transport pipes for that. Or are you putting out 500, 800, 1,000 firewalls at every site and managing those patches and managing that policy? And so I think really you look at, there is the pure, I'm going to save money every month moving from expensive legacy networks to high bandwidth, higher uptime with SD-WAN. But then there's also the kind of what we would call the soft cost, which is reducing or eliminating outages, simplifying complexity to manage the network, reduction of hardware as well as an immediate hard cost savings as well.
Yeah, you really hit on a lot of things. That last one, the SD-WAN device, can replace the branch office router, for example, and the firewall, and provide the simplified management that you talked about, and certainly being able to run traffic over links active. You're not waiting for that failover and network reconvergence. But I think, as you mentioned, what it really gets down to is uptime and productivity, right? Keeping all of those stores online. It used to be that you gave your card and they did a paper credit card receipt. Now it's all out over the network, and like you said, the store's out of business, right? If the network goes down.
Yeah, and speaking of that, many retail organizations are implementing IoT and connected devices to enhance the experience, the store experience. How does SD-WAN enable retailers to build out technologically advanced stores?
So obviously a loaded question with a lot of different answers. The first thing is everything is getting connected, right? So what does that mean without diving deeper or getting too technical? It means I need bandwidth, right? The same way you do in your house, the more people that connect their iPads and get to Netflix, and all of this is driving utilization. So we talked about how SD-WAN can utilize high bandwidth broadband circuits without needing the old, dedicated kind of cost bloat that goes with it, right? So automatically it can bring higher bandwidth, lower cost technology and circuits in. The second piece, and it kind of goes back to the ROI, but also in this environment, if anybody out there works in this sort of retail IT center, it's not working or it's causing problems. So visibility becomes that other piece. When we start to connect more things to this and we start to have greater integrations, APIs, data laking to understand the customer journey, right? And that's the ultimate goal we're seeing retailers try to move towards, which is how can I understand the profile of my customer? How do I get them to stay longer? How do I have a better experience to come back again, to buy more when they're in the store, right? And so you see the things like self-checkouts to be able to make it more convenient to get you in and out. Maybe it's, video in the stores. We're seeing more and more retail, you'll be able to do video help sessions like a one-to-many, as opposed to having to staff that. So there's a lot that starts to drive that. And so what VMware does with Edge Network Insights and the SD-WAN platform, the ability to see what's generating traffic, where it's going, what's causing problems, latency, et cetera. And I think that sort of visibility and knowledge is critical because of the interdependencies of all the things you see there on your screen. And those are only going to continue to grow, but also understanding how they're interacting together. Because if one thing goes down, you're getting that call that says it's not working. And there's a lot. So I think Edge Network Insights really helps you get ready for that store of the future.
No, you're really right about that. And what we found in the last couple of years is that your traditional retail stores may have struggled, but the ones that have been adopting the digital technology and the online selling and doing the kind of things you've talked about of, enabling their customers to use their iPhones and the digital checkout, those are the ones that have really thrived, come to the forefront in the last couple of years.
And again, you think about too, the digital transformation is now meeting, the kind of customer CX transformation at the same time. So digital pricing on shelves, right? Being able to be dynamic with flash sales and things like that. And all of these sort of connected devices are just driving more and more bandwidth and requiring more and more visibility.
Yeah.
All righty. Let's see here. Is SD-WAN the correct long-term choice for retailers?
So you're going to see this continue to evolve, right? We've already seen SD-WAN move to kind of now SASE and integrating security into the POPs, right? So we're going to continue down this path. Where I think SD-WAN is a great long-term fit for retailers is because of that freedom and flexibility I talked about in the beginning, how it unlocks the ability to, we never would have thought, 10 years ago that we were going to be bringing broadband links in to run Fortune 500 retail companies, but that's how we operate today. We never would have thought that there's a low Earth orbiting satellite that could deliver 500 meg with 20 milliseconds of latency, but we're right on the horizon of that. right? And that's going to be a real driver in retail as well. So this technology of being able to create an overlay where the transport doesn't matter, right? It's agnostic, I think is a huge deal. I think you're going to continue to see, obviously, things move more and more up. We work with, I mentioned early on, a 3,000 location retailer globally. One of their shifts has nothing to do with technology. It has to do with, where shopping malls are going and kind of seeing the end of that journey in the kind of culture of shopping. And so we've already started to see a lot of retailers start to combine brick and mortar. And so this 3,000 site retailer, they're going into places that aren't the shopping mall. They're going into grocery stores that want their specific product, right? There's not a conflict there. And it's how do we start to stay competitive? How do we stay competitive with global cloud providers that are also global retailers? And so I think SD-WAN allows them quick pop-up shop, allows them to connect back to their resources, allows them to be part of a network, but segmented from it. And then, I talk about how we're plugging in SASE and we're plugging in security. Businesses in the retail space are needing to adapt more than ever, whether it be because of COVID, whether it be because of the giant conglomerates. And the approach that we take from Onyx's standpoint is we utilize VMware SD-WAN as that tool that allows us to adapt and be flexible and not necessarily know where you're going to be in 12 months, 24 months, but know that we're going to have the underlying architecture that allows us to unlock whatever that needs to be. And you're talking here, our applications moving to the cloud. How are you engaging with customers in e-commerce? What are you doing in your store around wireless and wayfinding and all of those things? It's VMware SD-WAN at the root of that. And then also the security component. And I think we talk a little bit further, but Michael, anything to add there?
Well, no, I like that you mentioned the pop-up shop because we've seen that quite a bit, just like you said, in non-traditional locations. And so with SD-WAN, you can quickly provision the edge device. You can use whatever connectivity is already available, and you can enable these digital technologies to be up and running sometimes in just hours, and at the scale that you mentioned in the beginning. I think that's a really big part of it, the fact that retail stores, they're unique in that they have thousands of locations, some of them tens of thousands of locations. So the ability to roll things out quickly and at scale and then enable these technologies, I think you really hit on is important.
And I think that there's some unique technologies too, Michael. Like as you think about this, the work from home crowd and hybrid workforce of the last 2.5 years, retail, unified communications, voice over IP is still incredibly relevant. Whereas most of us haven't picked up a desk phone in a while. Maybe we operate it from our cell phone. Maybe we have, Teams and Zoom and Skype and all of these. Those become our communication tools. That's not what happens in a retail store. When somebody calls to say, what are your hours? When somebody calls in, to say, hey, do you have this item in stock, right? And I think we're starting to see a growing inventory concern, not just with supply chains, but even before that was, well, I shop online. I'd rather go in and buy it. I'd rather have instant gratification. But when I go in, they don't have the item. So I'm just going to go on to cloud provider and buy the item, right? And so I think there's some unique, I compare it to healthcare. We still do faxing in healthcare, even though it's dead everywhere else. Retail's holding on to that. Voice is still a mission critical part. And then the advancement around that with, enhanced IVR and contact centers and blending that to e-commerce. So I think some of these things that more and more businesses are kind of starting to get what I consider is designing to the employee rather than the location. What are your applications you use in your home or in your house, which we utilize VMware SD-WAN to enable that as well. When we sent contact centers home, we had a lot of customers that we put VMware SD-WAN into the home. But I think retail is one of those unique ones. Obviously, they didn't shut down. They didn't send people home to work from home during the pandemic. They had to operate, business as usual. And so I think keeping that VMware SD-WAN underneath, when you talk about, is it right for the future? Absolutely, because I think it can help them today and unlock where they need to go.
Yeah, and you're right about voice over IP. And, of course, the SD-WAN recognizes it. They can isolate it, make sure it gets the bandwidth and the performance. And retail really depends on that. So I think you've really hit on what the trend is for retail and how SD-WAN can support it.
All right. Does SD-WAN have any built-in security features?
So, hot button, Michael, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's got quite a few, and certainly security is important as more and more of the commerce is being done over the network. But one of the first things is PCI compliance. So SD-WAN can isolate credit card traffic and provide security for it. It can provide network segmentation so that PCI traffic or guest customer traffic are kept separate from each other. And of course, we've had this tested and then certified so we can provide backup for the compliance and how we comply. But then I mentioned there's the edge device out at the remote location that does have a built-in firewall. It also has a virtualization environment where you could put in a next generation virtual firewall. But then, as we're seeing on this slide, the ability to do what we call service chaining, which is to send traffic to cloud-based security before it goes on to its final location. And you'd mentioned SASE, and that's really the future, where you have a point of presence with multiple security capabilities to provide zero trust access. So network firewall, secure web gateways, those kind of capabilities sitting in the cloud, and where the traffic is sent to them first, and then it goes to the application. So keeping in mind, like you said before, in the old days, everything went over the private network to the data center. It hit the corporate firewall, the corporate VPN. But a lot of organizations are putting in a link to go straight to the cloud. They're bypassing the traditional security. So you need this security in the cloud architecture to solve all of those problems.
Well, I think too, Michael, one of the things from Onyx's point of view, why we really value VMware's approach to this is you see multiple logos there, right? So VMware is a player in the SASE space. We got, obviously, NSX Firewall has been the industry leader in data center firewalls for the last 5-6 years, right? So we've got NSX security native on VMware SASE. We've got the Workspace ONE and the ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access, that VMware's been providing. But there's also a unique benefit here, and that is that you're not forcing and driving customers to. There are other OEMs in the SD-WAN space that will have some kind of cloud secure internet gateway or SASE platform, and that will only integrate to their device. Or you can do an IPsec tunnel to it. But again, in retail, right, we're starting with this idea of get rid of that legacy network, drive out cost, and we'll bring reliability of a broadband and an LTE. Well, that becomes a challenge. I have to build IPsec from that to a secure internet gateway on both links. And what if I don't have static IPs, and especially on my LTE link? And so what we do with the VMware SD-WAN and their SASE POPs, we can actually build that encrypted tunnel, what you're seeing there, with the dynamic path, multipath optimization, going from a retail site to a VMware gateway. And then that builds the IPsec over to whether, Checkpoint and their Harmony product or Zscaler, you name it, right? You can see Palo Alto, Prisma Access, all of the logos you see up there. Not only do I love the fact that VMware has said, hey, we want to enable you not only to get to the cloud, but to get to cloud security. And if you do want to bring it locally, I talked about in retailers wanting to get rid of the 800 firewalls. Well, Michael hit on it. There is firewall capability in the VMware Edge, but also if you have an existing platform, let's virtualize. Let's do a VNF from Fortinet, from Checkpoint, from Palo Alto, or all support it. And so I love this approach that VMware takes of really saying, hey, we've been a player here and everybody knows the NSX firewall, but you may not have known us out at the branch edge. And so if you want to keep doing what you're doing, we're going to unlock that and enable it. It's a key differentiator in this space.
Yeah, I think you really hit on two things. One is the automation of setting up those tunnels. If you were doing it on traditional equipment, it would really take some time. And then, VMware has a complete SASE offer, and we're happy for customers to use all of our services. But we know that a lot of people already have a relationship, say with Zscaler or Fortinet, or there's some reason why that works for them. And so we can direct traffic to those devices as well. So it really comes down to what the customer needs.
All right. Let's see what we got here next. What does the Onyx and VMware partnership offer that other SD-WAN providers lack?
So I'll kick that off, Michael. So I think here's the thing for especially for retail, right? We're talking to retailers today. Beyond technology, operations is probably equal or more important. How do I go and span an entire country, an entire continent, an entire globe to roll out, to troubleshoot, to break fix, to have hands on site, right? So that's the first thing that Onyx is able to bring to the table. We're able to take VMware's technology. We're able to understand the operational, whether through project management, white glove implementation, engineering expertise, those sorts of things. The other thing that Onyx really approaches this with is we understand that customers may have different financial models, buying models, go-to-market strategies. Some are very CapEx friendly. Perfect. We can, obviously we're partnered with VMware. We can sell you. You can own that asset. And then if you want, we'll do professional services to help you implement it and then hand you the keys. Or continue ongoing. We'll manage that for you, giving your team access. And then my favorite part is we offer a co-managed, right? And that's a complete utility model. We see retailers saying, hey, we have to continue. We're opening stores, we're closing stores, we're moving things around. And so we make a complete utility model with VMware SD-WAN. It's a fixed monthly fee. A lot of our customers are used to paying a monthly fee for MPLS with a managed router today. And we simply take that cost takeout, so there isn't a barrier to entry. Especially retail, a lot of our customers are coming to us and saying, hey, we recognize we can save 30%, we can save 40%, but that's an operational savings. I still have to go to the business and get some multi-million-dollar capital expense, and then I recoup that savings back within 12 months or within 24 months. So we offer this zero barrier to entry from the Onyx standpoint, where we can say, hey, today you're paying X. We're actually going to reduce that by 20, 30%. You're going to start paying Y, no capital outlay. And then we do co-manage that. And again, that's a huge differentiator. A lot of times with retail, we don't necessarily want managed services. We know our business. We know our customers. We, the retailer, want to be the one in charge. But the difference is versus other industries, my day ends at 5 o'clock, right? My family time starts at 5 and on the weekends. Retailers don't have that luxury. Your busy time starts after 5 o'clock. It starts on Saturday and Sunday. And so having a co-managed relationship with Onyx, you still have access, you still have control, but really we're giving you back your nights and weekends without this giant capital influx to get started, and then checking the operational headache. Michael, curious your thoughts from the VMware side.
Oh yeah, you've definitely hit on the advantages. I mean, we do have customers, large enterprises that do it themselves, but they have a learning period. Even though SD-WAN is a lot easier than routers, it's still networking. We know networking is complex. So I know Onyx started with VMware back in 2016. So you have a lot of experience. And I think really time to deployment is one of the things you've talked about. The customer could go through that whole process of figuring out which vendor, which can take 6 months or more, or they could come to you guys, benefit from your experience and get it up and running in a lot less time, right? And then you have the various options and for how it's managed, which I think is great. I know some organizations like to see the reporting, they like to see the device status. You can give them that capability. But the big thing I think is really getting to market and not having to worry about the underlying equipment and the network. Organizations are better off taking their key information technology experts and putting them to work, making the business better, deploying all of those digital capabilities in the retail locations rather than worrying about the underlying network that's delivering the traffic.
Yeah, John, you mentioned earlier ease of management. However, obviously adding a bunch of internet providers to the mix can add additional retail burden to the retail's IT department. What options are available there, or things that we can offer to help with that process?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to, again, I always think Onyx, we differentiate ourselves with flexibility. We started this presentation with SD-WAN is here to unlock you from I have to. I'm unlocking you from I'm going to giant national telco A because I have to. All my sites are on net to them. Or, one of the things I see is in that kind of giant telco, global telco space, they say, well, yeah, we can do this for you. We're going to bring SD-WAN. and then you're going to plug our MPLS into it, and you're going to plug in our dedicated internet, and then you're going to plug in our GPON, best effort internet, and then we've got an LTE. We're going to plug our LTE into it, and you're sitting there going, wait a minute. How did this give me anything more than I already had with MPLS? It's still one provider, one network. It's still, at the mercy of your flexibility of, ticket times, response times, right? And so we firmly believe, and we've seen this, as Michael said, since 2016. And the reason we were the first on the bandwagon, right? And we are an MPLS provider across North America. We have legacy networks, but we saw this as an opportunity to say, I don't need to own the last mile anymore. We're going to go give that freedom to the customer. And for the first time, service providers and telcos have to earn the retail customer's business every day. That's what VMware's unlocked. Not, well, you know how hard it would be for them to move 1,000 sites? So we don't care about our ticket times and our SLAs. It would really put the power, if you do it right, back to the retailers. And so what Onyx does is we come in and we say, listen, we understand it's going to be a headache for you to get rid of one MPLS provider. And maybe it's 5 ISPs, maybe it's 100 ISPs. It depends on your footprint. Are you across all of North America? Are you global? Are you, only in Canada? Right? What does that look like? But we also are saying we don't want you to have the same provider. We don't want you to have ISP for your primary circuit, and that same ISP also manages a wireless network. And now you've got this kind of choke point, right? And so we want you to bring in, broadband A and LTE B that's in a failover state, right? Again, remember going back, we said VMware can enhance even a single link because they're packet-based. So I don't need it always up and running and using bandwidth and costing me money. The other piece is you may not always have things available. You may have to rely on satellite to deliver your internet, which again, we're not there yet. We're close to that being reliable. But today, that still might be the only option for you. Or you may already have it, right? And that's the other thing we talk with retailers about is Onyx can come in. We do bandwidth aggregation across the globe, right? So we have a network of, it's their same ISPs you would get from them, but we're monitoring it, we're managing it. And so one of the hardest things in managing a router or managing a network for customers is the dreaded vendor meet, right? There's an issue and they go, oh, it's your router. No, it's your MSP. No, it's your ISP. And how do you get everybody on the phone? So the first thing is, well, I can go and bring you that same local ISP and that same LTE provider, but I have multiple LTE providers, and I actually pool that data across so that you can bring the right technology, the right coverage. Or if you already have a circuit, we do what's called a letter of agency, right? And so we say, hey, here's what we'll do. It's already in there. You're going to have to pay their bill, right? You already have your account set up, but I'll go ahead and take agency and I'll open the ticket on your behalf. And so now you have Onyx, and we have visibility into your VMware SD-WAN. We configured it. We're managing it with you. And we can manage that internet circuit. And I think that's a game changer. So whether we do aggregation for you around internet, around private networks like MPLS, around LTE, now you get one single bill and we're monitoring all of that. Or if you already have it, we're not going to say you got to rip that out to put ours in. We'll just go ahead and give you that same operational benefit or removal of a headache. So I think that's significantly different because most of our competitors are either not in that space or they are in that space and they're only pushing their product, right? They're pushing their underlying or their underlays. And we want to unhandcuff you from that and make telcos earn your business every day.
No, that's a great summary. And the flexibility that you talked about, they don't have to just rip everything out. They can consult with you, figure out what works, put in the SD-WAN, deal with the links, as you need to. So, yeah.
All right, I'm going to flip to this next slide here. This is kind of wrapping it up in general. But while I leave this up on the screen, I have a question that came in via SMS to me a second ago on my phone. And there's a lot of buzz around E&I. Is that something you guys can talk about? Tell us a little bit about that. Give us some insights into what that product does.
Michael, you want to take lead, or would you like me
to?
To?
Yeah. Well, I'll just mention briefly, E&I, Edge Network Intelligence, is a monitoring and reporting capability that is a part of SD-WAN. We've incorporated it recently. So, you just talked a little while ago about the finger pointing that can go on, and E&I can really help with that. You can figure out very quickly where the problem is. Is it in the link? Is it in the device? Is it in the application performance? So that's the basics of what it is. But I don't know if you want to talk about how Onyx is utilizing ENI.
Well, and again, this comes back to what we talked about around security and SASE as well, right? So ENI from VMware, again, how do we utilize VMware to unlock the power of our network, even if it's not a VMware technology? And so we actually, and when we deploy a VMware SD-WAN edge, right, we're deploying that ENI license right there on the edge, but we also can apply that license to non-VMware. I have a retail customer that I think it's Meraki as their access points, and those APs are running ENI on them. And so we're not only reporting back the telemetry and helping them pinpoint where that issue is once it's passing through the edge, but we're actually helping identify issues in the wireless network and channel interference and people connecting. And so I think when you start talking about retail specifically, hundreds, thousands of sites, even 50 sites, again, you're trying to solve a headache in a business. It's hard enough. Now go and do it 800 times in environments that you can't see. There's shadow IT. I've been working with retail probably 6-7 years now. It's pretty dedicated to just that retail vertical. The amount of shadow IT. You have the most informed store manager you've ever had that at home, they're getting 300 meg and it's cheap. And now all of a sudden they went out on their own and maybe the employees pooled the money and they got a residential circuit dropped into the break room there. I mean, there can be a lot of challenges and a lot of problems in retail because it's not a single office where you kind of hold the keys to the kingdom. You're not there every day. You don't see it every day from an IT standpoint. So edge network intelligence really is giving you insight into the network of where your challenges are, what hop along the way, are there configuration issues? And so all of a sudden, when you get that phone call from the store manager or from the employee that just says it's not working, rather than starting down the path of, well, let's define it. What do you mean it, right? These same troubleshooting, ENI helps you go, there it is. Now let's go find out, right? Maybe DHCP, these timers, things like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm checking to see if we have any additional questions here. It looks like we do not at this time. Do you guys have anything additional to go over, or any other use cases, John, to talk about?
Well, I think, there's some things that I'm really excited for the roadmap, and they're not necessarily things we can share here. I think on the previous slide, you mentioned that Onyx participates in VMware's SD-WAN Insiders, right? And we have a seat there. Yep. And I think watching the continued iteration where VMware is going with the platform, I think there's a lot of exciting things to come. I think as you look at these components that make it up, whether they are all VMware or if it's VMware enabling it, one of the things we have a lot of retail customers who say we'd love to go to the cloud, Azure, GCP, AWS, but we can't because we're stuck in these private networks and I don't want to pay for, express route or, direct connect and these high cost things, right? And so again, VMware enables that. Even though it's not their technology, whether it's running a virtual VMware SD-WAN edge in your environment and advertising your VNets and VPCs into that overlay, or utilizing that gateway architecture. And so I get asked this all the time since 2016, what capes, I think Gartner started in 2019, putting out their SD-WAN or SD edge, and VMware's been number one every single time. And people ask me all the time, what drives that? It's that gateway architecture. That gateway architecture continues to unlock. So I'm in AWS and I can only advertise, 10, 15, and whatever, I don't know what the number is now, VPCs into a VPN tunnel. Well, I got a challenge if I've got 1,000 retail sites. But all of a sudden, if that tunnel's coming off of a VMware gateway, or if I took my stuff out to a hosted voice platform, well, that's great that I have multiple internet links, but if one dies, that SIP registration is still stuck on that IP, right, for whatever my NAT timer is. But that's not the case if it's coming off of a gateway. Now I can underpin as many underlays and circuits. And so as you kind of think about comparing VMware to other providers, to me, there's two key differentiators. The first one is what we continue to talk about in the beginning. It's packet-based. Bring a single link. I can make your network rock solid and stable with VMware SD-WAN over a single link, and then still bring LTE just in case, right? To a line cut or something like that. We don't need two links. And I think that's a key differentiator. And then the other becomes taking that gateway and making it a part of your network, making it the source NAT out to the internet, making it the service insertion point to a cloud-based firewall, making it, your service point into your private cloud IaaS or PaaS platforms, right? All of those, to me, like that differentiator, VMware was designed to unlock, and unlock from single stack, right? You have to buy this logo if you want this feature, to buy that logo, and it's better together, and you have to create this giant bill of materials. VMware was designed to unlock the freedom of your network without having to go VMware through the entire stack. Obviously, they hope you do, right? And there's a lot of great products, but you don't have to. You can take advantage of this without everything else. And then Onyx is designed the same way, to unlock you from your carrier. So I think that's why that marriage made so much sense.
No, that's great. I think you really summarized the whole thing. And certainly there's more to come, right? With SASE, with ENI, and being able to deliver additional capabilities. But you've hit on a lot of the big ones, the gateways. I'm glad you brought that up, because you really simplify that access to the cloud.
Well, guys, I think we're kind of coming to an end here, wrapping things up. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you to VMware, and thank you to Onyx and the folks on the back end that made this possible. Really appreciate it, and thanks for everybody for watching. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.